I was folding laundry when the phone rang. The old landline in the kitchen, the one I barely used anymore. I almost didn't pick up. These days, it's mostly robocalls or wrong numbers. But something about the silence in the house made me reach for it anyway. Hello, a man's voice steady but slightly rough. Is this Margaret Walker? Yes, who's calling? My name's Raymond Russo. I run Russo's Pawn and Gold just off Oak Ridge Boulevard in Brookfield. I didn't say anything. I didn't even breathe. I believe I have something that belongs to you, he added. A Rolex, Submariner vintage model, inscribed on the back. My heart stuttered. That's not possible. My voice came out thinner than I expected. It came into the shop yesterday, he continued. Looked legitimate. But when I opened the back, I noticed something odd. There's a message in there, handwritten. My knees nearly gave out. I grabbed the counter behind me. I'm sorry, ma'am, but this felt personal. It didn't sit right with me to just process the sale. I figured I'd try to reach out before making it official. I could barely find my voice. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I hung up without another word and stood there for a second, surrounded by the hum of my quiet kitchen. The clock ticked above the fridge, the dryer buzzed once in the hallway. Then I moved. The drive to Brookfield felt longer than usual. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. It was a Wednesday morning, bright and cold, the kind of day Thomas would have liked. He always said he could think better when the air was crisp. I'd kept his watch for nearly 3 years, locked in my dresser inside its leather box next to his wedding band and the handkerchief he'd always carried in his jacket. The Rolex was more than just a watch. It was him. The scratches along the bezel, the weight of it, the worn leather strap we'd replaced twice. Every inch of it held memory. And now it was gone. I didn't even know when. Russo's Pawn and Gold was wedged between a liquor store and an old barber shop, the kind of place you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I parked, took a deep breath, and walked in. A bell jingled as I opened the door. The man behind the counter looked like he belonged there. Thick forearms, sleeves, rolled up gray stubble gold chain barely visible under his flannel. But his eyes were surprisingly kind. You must be Margaret, he said. I nodded. You look just like him, he added softly. Thomas. He used to come in here sometimes years ago. Bought tools, pawned a few things during slow months, but always came back. Always paid in full. My throat tightened. Without another word, he walked to the back and returned with a familiar leather case. He set it on the glass counter and opened it. There it was, my husband's Rolex, looking smaller than I remembered, almost fragile. He tilted the watch in his hand, found a small notch and gently pressed it. The back popped open with a faint click. Not standard, he said. Someone had it modified. Inside was this. He handed me a folded slip of paper, yellowed slightly at the edges. I haven't read it, he said. Felt like it wasn't mine to open. With shaking fingers, I unfolded it. Just a few lines in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. Maggie, if you're reading this, it means the watch isn't where it should be. Don't panic. Go to First National Bank Box 447. The key is in my old toolbox inside the level. What's in that box belongs to you. Always has. I stood there, frozen paper in one hand, watch in the other. Raymond's voice broke the silence. The woman who brought it in, she said it was hers to sell, talked about helping her father's new business. I asked for ID. It was Vanessa Carter. I closed my eyes. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law. And suddenly everything made sense, the missing watch, the tense glances at dinner, the extra silence from Brian. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. And it had my late husband's name carved right into it. I didn't drive straight home after leaving the pawn shop. I couldn't. My body was behind the wheel, but my mind was somewhere else, entirely still standing at that glass counter, staring at the one thing I thought no one could ever take from me. Thomas's watch. The Rolex wasn't about luxury or money. It was about years, decades. It had been on his wrist through everything: weddings, funerals, scraped knuckles, surprise anniversaries, Sunday breakfast, even through chemo, especially through chemo. When his hands started to tremble, I would fasten the clasp for him. Near the end, when his skin got too thin, we loosened the strap together. On his last day, he took it off and pressed it into my hand. "This is yours now, Maggie," he whispered. "Only yours." That watch had never left my drawer until someone else decided it should. I pulled into the parking lot of an old diner we used to love. It had closed years ago, but the sign was still up, rusted and flickering. I parked in the back and turned off the engine. The air felt still, like everything had paused to let me feel this. I opened the leather box in my lap. It was still ticking. It hadn't changed, but I had. I ran my thumb across the worn strap, then flipped the case to read the inscription. To Margaret. "So you'll always know what your time is worth. Love, Thomas." My throat tightened. He always chose his words carefully, never wasted a syllable, not in life, and apparently not in death. And yet Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, had walked into my room, opened my drawer, taken this, and sold it. To fund her father's latest business idea. Brian had to have known. He knew where I kept it. He saw me wear it at the funeral. He helped me put it away. He saw me open the drawer on quiet nights just to hold it. But he let it go. Whether he gave permission or turned his back, it didn't matter. He didn't stop her, and that meant he was part of it. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the note Raymond had given me, folded age, slightly handled, like it meant something. Because it did. Thomas's handwriting, all caps. Left-leaning, firm, certain. Maggie. If you're reading this, something's happened to the watch. Don't panic. There's a safe deposit box at First National Bank Box 447. The key is in my toolbox inside the level. What's in that box belongs to you. Always has. My hands trembled slightly as I folded the note again. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat and stared straight ahead. The garage had always been his space. I hadn't touched a thing since the funeral. Brian had offered to clean it up last year. I told him not to. That wasn't about preservation. That was about respect. I started the engine and drove home. I didn't go through the front door. I walked around the side, past the creaky gate and into the garage. The air inside still smelled like old pine oil and thyme. Dust shimmered in the morning light like quiet reminders. There it was, his red toolbox, scuffed at the corners, dented along the lid. Solid. I knelt down, opened the latches, and flipped the lid. Screwdrivers, socket wrenches, Allen keys, a half-used pencil with his bite marks still on it. Nothing fancy. All familiar. Then I saw it. The Stanley level. Bright yellow scratched along the side. He used to call it my second spine. Nothing's right if it's not level, he'd say. That goes for shelves and people. I turned it over. The bubble chamber had a tiny screw cap. I'd never noticed that before. He counted on that. I unscrewed it. Inside, wrapped in a strip of plastic and curled tightly, was a key. Small, worn, with a faint engraving at the top that simply read FNB. I held it in my palm. This wasn't just a safety deposit key. This was his insurance policy, his way of protecting me from the very thing that had just happened. I stood slowly and looked around the garage. Everything was just as he left it. Except now I had something new, proof that he knew this world well enough to plan for its worst version, and trust me to face it. I slipped the key into my coat pocket, not the watch. The watch went on my wrist, where it belonged. I left the garage without looking back. Next stop, First National Bank. The marble floor of First National Bank was too clean, too quiet. Every footstep echoed like a question I didn't want to answer. I approached the front desk trying to steady my voice. "Hi, I need access to a safe deposit box, number 447. The young teller looked up, blinked behind thick-rimmed glasses. "Do you have the key and ID?" I handed them over. She studied the key, then typed something into her computer. "All right, Ms. Walker," she said with a polite smile. "Right this way. One of our associates will assist you in the vault." She buzzed a side door. A tall man in a gray vest appeared, holding a clipboard. "Good morning, ma'am. Follow me." The hallway to the vault was narrow and cold. I ran my fingers along the wall as we walked, more to ground myself than anything else. We stopped at the end of the corridor, where a large steel door loomed. He turned a heavy wheel, tapped a code, and pulled the door open. Rows and rows of small metal drawers lined the walls inside. The associate scanned the clipboard, found the location, and motioned. "Here we are, box 447. He inserted his master key, then turned to me. Your key, please. I handed it over and watched as he unlocked the box. Take your time, he said, stepping back to give me space. Then he exited, leaving the door slightly ajar. I pulled the box out. It was heavier than I expected. The small table in the center of the room looked like it belonged in a doctor's office, not a bank. I sat, exhaled, and opened the lid. Inside was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Beneath that, two more things: a thick brown leather notebook and a flat bundle wrapped in butcher paper and tied with twine. I opened the letter first. Thomas's handwriting again, steady, deliberate. Maggie. If you found this, then you already know something's gone wrong. Maybe it was the watch, maybe something else. Either way, you're here now, and that means it's time. You've always trusted people too much. That's not a fault, Maggie. That's who you are. But you'll need more than trust to get through this. Inside the bundle are bearer bonds, clean legal, and issued back when my investments were still quiet. The last time I checked, they were worth about $100,000. Probably more with interest. The notebook is your armor. It has records of contracts I took in private off the books. Names, amounts, payments. There's about $50,000 in unpaid fees, if anyone's honest enough to settle. I never pushed hard on people, but I know you will if you need to. I didn't tell you about these because I hoped you'd never need them. But if someone's taken the watch, then they've crossed a line I hope no one ever would. Use what's here, finish what I couldn't, and please don't let them smile to your face while stealing behind your back. With all my love, always Thomas. My eyes stung, but I didn't cry, not here, not in this cold little room where strangers waited just outside the vault. I set the letter down carefully and reached for the bundle. I untied the twine and peeled back the layers of paper. Sure enough, 6 bearer bonds, crisp and well kept. And real. Each marked at $10,000 with the interest notes dating back nearly 15 years. I tucked them back into the envelope, then the notebook. It was worn but intact, filled cover to cover with Thomas's meticulous handwriting. Every client, every side job, every loan repaid or not. At the back was a page labeled Outstanding Debts. First entry, Monroe and King Construction, $15,000 unpaid, June 2019. There were names I recognized, local businesses, old friends, all who likely thought Thomas had taken the money to his grave. He hadn't. He'd just waited. I exhaled again, this time slower. He had left me a map, a record, a weapon if I needed one. I closed the notebook, placed everything back in the box, and rang the bell near the vault door. The associate returned, eyes neutral. All set, ma'am. I nodded. Yes, thank you. As I walked out of the bank, sunlight cut across my face like a spotlight. I didn't blink. The key was back in my coat pocket. The watch was on my wrist, and the weight I carried was no longer just grief. It was resolve. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car in the bank's parking lot for nearly an hour, Thomas's notebook open on the passenger seat, the names and numbers jumping off the page like old ghosts: Monroe and King Construction, Russo Freight, Amber Ridge Design, people Thomas had quietly worked for, people who owed him thousands. I knew I couldn't go after all of them. That wasn't the point, but I could go after one. The right one, the one that would get their attention. So I picked up my phone and called the law office listed on the card Thomas had tucked into the back of the notebook. A voice answered on the second ring, Diane Vasquez. Her tone was brisk, firm, no nonsense. I told her everything from the missing watch to the safe deposit box to the names on the page I now held in shaking hands. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she asked just one question. Are you ready for them to come after you? I didn't hesitate. They already did. I'm just finally standing up. She exhaled just once. Then come in tomorrow. First thing. Bring the book. The morning after the dinner, I woke up earlier than usual. My body felt like it had walked through a storm, but finally stood on dry land. There were still emails to send, documents to finalize, and lawyers to meet, but emotionally something inside me had shifted. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. I had looked every single one of them in the eye and said without saying, I see you. I'm not afraid of you anymore. Diane called me around 10 a.m. "Ready to file?" she asked. No small talk. "Absolutely," I replied. "I've got the civil suit papers ready. We're going after the unauthorized sale breach of inheritance rights and fraudulent misrepresentation. But that's not the real bomb. What is, there's a whistleblower, someone from inside Walter's company, that made me sit up straighter. Who, she didn't give a name, just said she used to handle back office paperwork. She's got proof that Walter's startup accepted at least 3 large investments based on forged valuations, one of which used the watch appraisal as collateral." I had to pause. The idea that Thomas's watch had not only been stolen, but used to legitimize a lie that burned deeper than any theft. "She's willing to testify," I asked, "if needed. But she's scared. Walter plays dirty. She wants protection. Let's give it to her." By the end of the day, Diane had added a request for witness protection to our legal motion. She told me to be ready. The moment we filed, the press would explode. That night, I sat by the fire with Thomas's old notebook in my lap. Not his business ledger, the other one. The one where he wrote ideas, doodles dreams. It smelled like sawdust and oil, and something I could never describe but always remembered. On the inside cover, he had scribbled something years ago in barely legible handwriting: "Build something that lasts longer than yourself." That line hit different now. 2 days later, the story went national. Major headlines across finance and lifestyle sites. Talk shows mentioned the widow with the 1-point family pattern watch and the daughter-in-law who sold it behind her back. They didn't even need names anymore. The story had grown legs. Walter's business partners began to jump ship. One investor issued a statement distancing himself, calling the valuation misrepresented, and citing ethical concerns. Diane grinned when she saw the article. Their own people are starting to fold. That's good for us. Meanwhile, Brian finally called me. He hadn't spoken since the birthday dinner. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "this is all getting out of hand." "No, Brian," I said quietly. "This is what it looks like when the truth catches up. I didn't know about the appraisal. I didn't know they used it for the loan." "Maybe you didn't," I said. "But you knew something wasn't right." He was quiet for a long time. "Vanessa, she's not handling this well. She was never going to." He didn't argue. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said eventually. "I should have stopped it. I didn't say I forgive you. I didn't say it's okay. That would have been too easy, too clean. Instead, I just said, then don't let it keep happening." A week later, we were scheduled to appear in court. Just a procedural hearing, but one that required all parties present. I walked in wearing Thomas's favorite navy coat, the one he used to wear when meeting important clients. Diane walked beside me, calm and confident. Vanessa was already seated with her attorney. Walter arrived 5 minutes late, flanked by 2 suits who looked like damage control specialists. He tried to meet my eyes. I didn't give him the satisfaction. The judge reviewed the case. Summary clicked her pen and asked the room, "Any motions before we proceed?" Vanessa's lawyer stood. "We'd like to request mediation in lieu of formal proceedings. My client wishes to resolve this amicably." I almost laughed again. Of course they did. Diane stood next. "Your Honor, we decline mediation. We're prepared to proceed with full litigation, including presentation of evidence, witnesses, and all supporting documents." The judge nodded. "Then we'll set the trial for 6 weeks from today." Afterward, in the hallway, Vanessa caught up with me. "Please," she whispered, "we'll lose everything if this goes to court." I looked at her, not cruelly, not even coldly, just plainly. "You lost everything the moment you chose money over decency." She looked like she wanted to cry, but I walked away before she could. I wasn't interested in her tears. I had my own to dry years ago. Alone. Later that night, I sat with Diane in her office as we reviewed the witness statement. The whistleblower, a woman named Carla, had signed an affidavit outlining the fraudulent paperwork she'd been ordered to file. It was damning, precise, with dates, emails, and screenshots. "I have no idea how they thought they'd get away with this," Diane muttered. "They thought no one would fight them," I said. She glanced at me, then smiled. They were wrong. The last document Diane handed me was a letter from the pawn shop owner, Raymond. He had officially withdrawn the watch from circulation and preserved it under federal protection. If the case went in our favor, it would be returned directly to me. I think Thomas would have been proud, Diane said. I didn't speak for a moment. He wouldn't have cared about the lawsuit, I said softly. But he would have cared that I stood up, that I didn't let them bury his name. Outside the window, the city lights flickered. I could see my reflection in the glass, older, yes, but not smaller, not faded. I was no longer just a widow. I was the keeper of a legacy, and I was almost ready to close this chapter. Almost. By Friday, Diane had a strategy. It was sharp, surgical, and completely legal. Don't swing at everything, she advised. Make one precise move and let the ripple do the rest. We filed a demand letter to Monroe and King, citing unpaid debt and breach of informal contract using Thomas's notes and dates as reference. No lawsuit yet, just a warning shot. Diane sent a copy to their accounting office and one to their legal team. Then, with my permission, she forwarded a third copy to Vanessa's startup inbox. She'd see the company name the amount and, most importantly, my name at the bottom of the letterhead. I didn't have to wait long. That Sunday, Brian called. It was the first time I'd heard from my son in over 3 weeks. His voice was cautious. Mom. Hey, can we talk? I paused. Talk or lie to me again. A beat of silence. I didn't know she sold the watch, he said. Not until it was gone. She told me you gave it to her, and you believed her I wanted to. Honest. Weak. I want to fix this, he added. For what it's worth. Then sit down with me, I said, and tell me everything. He met me at a diner. Neutral ground. He looked older than the last time I saw him. The circles under his eyes weren't from work. Guilt can age a person fast. She said it was an investment opportunity. Her dad needed seed funding for the expansion, said he had a guaranteed return. And the watch was just available. She told me it was sitting in the closet collecting dust. I looked at him. You know your father kept that in a safe for years. You were there when he had it appraised. You knew it wasn't just a watch, it was a piece of his legacy. Brian lowered his eyes. I know, I didn't say what I was thinking, and you still let it go. But this wasn't about punishing him. Not yet. What else, I asked. He hesitated. They took some of your mail. Vanessa didn't want you to see some of the letters from the bank. That explained the missing bank statements. And the house. What was the talk about refinancing? He nodded slowly. Her father wanted to use the equity in our place to secure another loan. Said if we put the house in his name temporarily, he could leverage it. Did you know? I said no. That's when things between us got tense. A small victory, but too little too late. You need to be careful, Brian said. Her dad's not someone you corner. If he finds out you're digging, he'll come for you. I smiled cold and clear. Then he better hurry, I said, because I'm not just digging, I'm building. That night I got an email from Vanessa Carter. Subject: You made your point, Maggie. I don't know what you think you're doing, but if this is about the watch, we can talk. Dragging my father's name into this was unnecessary and cruel. You've always resented me, and now you're just using this to settle personal scores. This will hurt Brian. I hope you realize that. Vanessa, no apology, no remorse, just smoke and mirrors. She thought this was about bitterness. She thought this was about family drama. She still didn't get it. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. And I'd only just knocked on the door. It was Wednesday when Diane called me into her office again. She didn't sound worried, but her voice had that clipped, focused edge that meant something had shifted. They responded, she said, handing me a printed letter, not just Monroe and King. Walter Carter's attorney reached out directly. I took the letter. It was heavier than it looked, not because of the paper, but because of what it meant. He's not denying anything. Diane added, but he's trying to settle, quietly. That made me laugh. A dry, sharp sound I hadn't heard myself make in years. Of course he is. She nodded. He's offering $75,000 to drop the claim. No further action, no publicity. And if I say no, then we push forward. But be prepared he won't stay quiet for long. I didn't need to think about it. Decline, politely. Then let's get louder. I expected a phone call. What I got instead was a surprise visit. Vanessa showed up at my door dressed in what she probably thought was her most peaceful outfit. Beige sweater, soft makeup, the kind of gentle smile that hides a knife. "Maggie," she said with a breathy sigh, "can we talk?" I didn't open the screen door. About what? She tilted her head like she was the one being wronged. "This whole situation. You didn't have to go this route. We're family." I raised an eyebrow. "So family means lying, stealing, and selling what wasn't yours." Her smile twitched. "It wasn't like that." "No, because the security footage from the pawn shop says otherwise." Her eyes flickered. Just a beat. "We can resolve this," she said. "Privately. My father's willing to return the money. Or most of it. We didn't know how much that watch meant to you." I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, let her squirm in her carefully rehearsed posture. "You never asked what it meant," I said. "You assumed it was just sitting there gathering dust. You assumed I wouldn't notice or wouldn't fight." She dropped the smile completely. "You're ruining Brian's life," she said flatly. "He's caught in the middle." "No," I replied, stepping closer to the door. "You dragged him there, and he let you. I'm just pulling him out." She opened her mouth, but I shut the door before she could speak. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. I just closed it with purpose. The next week was a whirlwind. Diane filed an injunction preventing the transfer of any new assets out of Walter Carter's business. She also uncovered inconsistencies in past business registrations that hinted at fraudulent loan applications, applications possibly backed by the watch sale. We weren't just talking civil damages anymore. This was starting to smell criminal. Brian texted me late one night. "Vanessa says they're hiring a crisis PR firm. She's panicking. Dad-in-law's furious." I didn't reply, but I smiled. Then came the press. It started with a small finance blog, picking up the story "Widow Fights Back" after family sells heirloom for startup cash. Within 2 days, local news caught on. The image they used was an old photo of Thomas standing in front of his workshop, arms crossed, a slight smirk on his face, and on his wrist, gleaming like a quiet legacy, was the watch. They didn't say our last names, but people knew. Suddenly, Walter Carter wasn't just a clever businessman. He was the man who funded his empire by flipping a dead man's inheritance. And Vanessa Shee became the poster child for entitled daughter-in-laws who thought no one would notice. The real confrontation happened at Brian's birthday dinner. Vanessa insisted on hosting it at their favorite restaurant, some modern fusion place, downtown, all exposed brick and fake intimacy. I wasn't planning to go, but Brian asked, said he wanted to talk, said he wanted me there. When I arrived, everything paused. They hadn't expected me to show. Vanessa's parents were there, seated comfortably near the middle. Walter looked up and actually flinched when he saw me, then quickly recovered into his practiced charm. "Maggie," he said, "didn't expect to see you." "I'm full of surprises," I said, calmly taking the empty chair opposite him. Brian sat next to me, tense, unsure whether to be grateful or afraid. Halfway through the meal, Vanessa tried to make a speech. She stood holding her glass, like she was toasting a merger instead of a birthday. "I just want to say," she began, "that family is complicated, and sometimes we hurt the people we love, but forgiveness is what keeps us whole." I looked up, slowly, deliberately. "That's funny," I said, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear, "because I don't remember anyone asking for forgiveness. Only a settlement." Silence. Vanessa's mother cleared her throat. Walter shifted in his seat. Brian dropped his eyes to his plate. "I didn't come here for closure," I continued. "I came to remind you all I'm not the woman you thought I was. And Thomas Walker wasn't the kind of man you get to erase." I stood, pulled something from my purse, and placed it gently on the table. A photo of Thomas, a copy of the watch's appraisal, the pawn shop receipt. Then I left. Quiet, direct, final. In the car, I didn't cry, I didn't shake. For the first time in weeks, I felt still. I wasn't finished yet, but I just knocked the wind out of the room they thought they owned, and they knew it. Walter Carter's fall didn't come as a dramatic explosion. It unraveled slowly like a sweater pulled apart thread by thread until nothing recognizable remained. The lawsuit Diane filed hit hard and fast. Once subpoenas were issued, and the financial fraud exposed investors began to back away. The Carter Tech startup that had boasted about being the next Silicon Valley unicorn suddenly looked like a hollow shell. Their office in downtown Atlanta closed within a week. Unpaid interns packed up equipment in cardboard boxes. The company website quietly went offline. Vanessa tried to maintain appearances at first. She posted smiling photos on social media claiming it was just a restructuring phase. But the likes dwindled, and the comments full of questions about the stolen inheritance and the lawsuit were impossible to ignore. Within days, her accounts went dark. Brian showed up at my house one afternoon. No call. Just knocked on the door with his head low, shoulders hunched like a scolded child. "I don't know where else to go," he said. "Everything's fallen apart." I stood still, looking at him. "Where's your wife?" He hesitated. "She's at her father's. They've been arguing nonstop. He blames her. She blames you. And me. I just—" He paused, then added softly, "I just miss when things weren't so complicated." I didn't say much. I invited him in, made him a cup of coffee just like I did when he was 16, and came home heartbroken over a failed math test. But things were different now. He knew it too. Later that evening, I found him staring at the mantel at Thomas's watch, now safely encased in a glass box. Brian rubbed his temples. "I should have stopped her," he whispered. "When she brought up the watch, I should have known something was off. But you didn't," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "And now, here we are." He nodded. "I think she's leaving me. I wouldn't blame her if she does." I looked at him, then not with anger, but with quiet recognition. He was still my son. But he wasn't the boy Thomas and I raised. At some point, he made his choices, and now consequences were simply following through. Days later, news broke that Walter had filed for bankruptcy. Multiple vendors had sued for unpaid contracts. The IRS launched an investigation into tax fraud. One article referred to him as the startup scammer. Another headline simply read, "The Empire Built on Lies." Vanessa, meanwhile, disappeared from public view entirely. Diane mentioned she had received a notice from Vanessa's legal team requesting a mediation meeting. I didn't attend. I had no interest in negotiating with someone who had stolen from her own family. "I'm not going to reclaim their love," I told Diane. "Only what's mine." She nodded. "Then we'll finish this your way." A few weeks passed. I received an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a folded piece of stationery with Vanessa's handwriting. "I never meant for things to go this far," it read. "I thought I was helping my family. I didn't see how far I'd fallen until I lost everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. I truly am." There was no signature, just that. I placed the letter in a drawer and didn't think about it again. As for Brian, he didn't stay long. One morning, he packed up the guest room and stood at the front door, suitcase in hand. "I've got a lot to figure out," he said. "Yes," I replied. "You do." He paused. "Do you hate me?" "No," I said. "But I don't trust you. Trust takes work now, real work." He nodded, eyes glassy. "I understand." And then he left. I didn't feel victorious. There was no grand parade, no dramatic music as the credits rolled. Just me, my quiet house, and the sound of wind brushing the leaves outside. But there was peace, the kind of peace that only comes after choosing truth over comfort, after fighting for dignity when silence would have been easier. I placed a fresh photo next to Thomas's watch. It was one of him in his workshop sleeves, rolled grease on his hands, grinning like he just solved the world's hardest puzzle. "I did it, Thomas," I whispered. I protected what mattered, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't just holding on. I was finally letting go. 6 months later, I moved into a small cottage on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. It wasn't grand, just 2 bedrooms, a sunlit kitchen, and a porch with creaky wood that overlooked a field of wildflowers. But it was mine, bought with the funds I recovered what Thomas had left for me, what Vanessa tried to erase. I spent my mornings walking the trail behind the cottage, coffee in hand, wrapped in Thomas's old flannel jacket. The wind was different here, softer, calmer, as if the mountains knew how much I'd been through and were whispering, "You're safe now." Inside, on a shelf by the fireplace, sat Thomas's watch restored, polished ticking gently like a heartbeat. Next to it, a photo of us on our wedding day. He wore that same watch. I wore hope on my face. Every now and then, someone from the past would write, a neighbor from our old block, one of Thomas's former clients. Even Brian once sent a postcard from Arizona. I'm trying to be better, Mom. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because silence too can be love. Sometimes people have to grow without being carried. I spent my afternoons teaching kids at the local library free woodworking classes using Thomas's old tools. The kids called me Miss Maggie. One little boy asked why I always smiled when sanding. Because this, I said, is what peace feels like. One rainy evening, I received a package, no return label. Inside was a small velvet pouch. I opened it. Inside was a delicate gold chain with Thomas's wedding band strung through it. There was a note. It took me too long to understand what this meant to you. I found it in my father's drawer. It belongs with you now. V. I held the ring for a long time. Then I strung it on the chain and placed it around my neck, not as a reminder of betrayal, but of survival, of love that endured everything, of a time that couldn't be stolen. Now every evening, as the sun sinks behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, I sit with a blanket and a cup of tea watching the shadows stretch and fade. And sometimes when the world is quiet, I whisper to Thomas, time is mine now, and I won't let anyone steal it again. And you. If someone tried to erase the one thing you cherished most, would you stay silent or fight to take it back?